What would you do if you found a 12-year-old boy unconscious in the back alley behind your restaurant? And the only number in his phone said, "Dad, don't call unless dying"? Vera Lund called it anyway. She'd been hauling trash bags out through the kitchen exit when she nearly tripped over him. At first she thought it was a pile of coats someone had dumped. Then the pile groaned. The boy was curled against the brick wall, face pale, one hand pressed to his side, school blazer soaked dark along the bottom hem. Her first instinct was to scream for Marco, the line cook. Her second instinct, the smarter one, was to kneel down and check if he was breathing. He was, barely, but he was. "Hey," she pressed 2 fingers against his neck the way her mother had taught her during the one CPR class they'd both taken at the community center 6 years ago. "Pulse there. Steady enough. Hey, can you hear me?" The boy's eyes opened halfway. Brown eyes, unfocused. "Don't," he started. "Don't what?" "Don't call an ambulance." He said it like he'd rehearsed it, like it was something he'd been told to say. That alone told Vera more than she wanted to know. She grabbed his phone from where it had slid across the wet pavement. Cracked screen, 3 contacts saved. School, Kieran. "Dad, don't call unless dying." She looked at the boy. She looked at the blood soaking through his shirt. She pressed call. It rang twice. "This number is for emergencies only." The voice on the other end was low and even, the kind of voice that didn't go up at the end of sentences. "Ever. Your son is bleeding in the alley behind Lund's on Carver Street," Vera said. "I'd call that an emergency." Silence. Then, "Don't move him. Don't call anyone else. I'll be there in 4 minutes." He was there in 3. The man who stepped out of the black car wasn't what Vera had pictured, though she couldn't have said what she'd pictured exactly. He was tall, dark coat, no tie, jaw tight enough to crack. He moved fast without looking like he was moving fast. The kind of walk that cleared rooms before he'd even spoken. 2 men stepped out behind him and stationed themselves at either end of the alley without being asked. He crouched beside the boy and did exactly what Vera had done, 2 fingers to the neck, hand on the forehead, eyes scanning the injury. "Kieran." Not a question, just the name, said quietly. The boy, Kieran, opened his eyes all the way this time. "I'm okay. You're not okay. I got jumped. 3 guys." Near the transit stop. The man's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. A cold, precise kind of shift, like a deadbolt turning. He looked up at Vera for the first time, really looked at her. She was still crouching across from him, one hand resting on Kieran's shoulder. "You found him? I almost tripped over him." She gestured at the trash bag still sitting 3 feet away. "I work here. I own the place, actually." He held her gaze for a moment. Whatever calculation he was running, he ran it fast. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. He needs stitches. He'll get them. He needs them in the next 20 minutes or that cut on his side is going to miss." The word wasn't rude. It was just final. "He will be taken care of." Vera sat back on her heels and looked at this man who clearly owned every room he'd ever walked into, and felt, not for the first time in her life, a very specific kind of irritation at being dismissed by someone who had already decided she didn't need to be in the conversation anymore. "My name is Vera," she said, "not Miss." He blinked. It was a small thing. She got the feeling not many people corrected him. "Vera," he said. "I'm Dorian Vance." She didn't recognize the name. Later she'd understand that most people in the city would have. She went back inside and finished her shift. That was the thing about owning a small restaurant. There was no one else to finish it for you. She seated the 6:30 reservations, ran 2 tables herself when Priya called in sick, argued with the fish supplier over the phone between courses, and didn't think about Dorian Vance or his bleeding son again until she was locking up at 11:15 and found a white envelope tucked under the windshield wiper of her car. Inside was a handwritten note on heavy cream paper. "Thank you for calling. DV," and beneath it $500 in cash. Vera stared at it for a long moment in the parking lot, the November air cold enough to see her breath. Then she went back inside, found a piece of receipt paper, wrote "I don't take tips" for basic human decency on it, folded the $500 inside, and put it in her coat pocket to figure out what to do with later. She wasn't going to stand in a parking lot and try to find a way to return money to a man she didn't have a number for. She found out 3 days later that she did in fact have a way, because Dorian Vance walked into her restaurant on a Thursday evening, without the black coat this time, without the 2 men who'd flanked him in the alley, and sat down at table 4 like he owned it. Which, as Vera's part-time server Gabby whispered from behind the host stand, he technically might. "That's Dorian Vance," Gabby said in the tone of someone announcing a natural disaster. "Vance Holdings. He owns like half the buildings on this block." Vera looked at the man sitting at table 4, reading her menu with his reading glasses on, and thought, of course he does. She walked over herself. "Mr. Vance. He looked up. You returned the envelope. It was tucked under my wiper. I didn't want you to feel like you'd lost it. He studied her for a moment. You could have kept it, I know. Most people would have. I'm not most people. Something in his expression shifted. Not quite a smile. Not quite. More like the muscles around his mouth had considered it briefly and decided not to commit. He set the menu down. How is it, the menu? The restaurant. You said you own it. It's good, she said, which was not entirely true. It was fine. It was hers, which was the only reason she hadn't sold it yet. The only reason she'd moved back here 2 years ago, taking over from her father when the stroke left his left hand shaking too badly to plate anything. It was the restaurant she'd grown up in, and the restaurant that was currently 2 months behind on its equipment lease. But she wasn't going to say that. Do you want to order? He ordered. She brought the food herself. He ate slowly like someone who was accustomed to eating alone and had made his peace with it. When she came to clear the plates, he said, without looking up, How old is the hood vent in your kitchen? Vera stopped. I'm sorry? The ventilation hood, over the range. How old is it? Why? Because the exhaust pipe on the east wall is venting at the wrong angle for the building's airflow. I noticed when I was outside. You're probably losing 20% efficiency on your cold storage because the heat isn't clearing properly. Vera stared at him. You diagnosed my kitchen ventilation from the alley? I was looking at the building. He said it simply, like it was obvious. I look at buildings. You own buildings. That too. She didn't know what to do with him. He was precise and unsettling, and he just accidentally described a problem she'd been trying to trace for 4 months. The cold storage running warm, the utility bills climbing, Marco complaining that the kitchen felt like a sauna by 8 o'clock. She'd had 2 different contractors in, and neither of them had mentioned the hood vent once. How do you fix it? She asked. He told her. He came back the following Thursday, and the one after that. Kieran came with him the 3rd time. The boy moving fine now, no visible sign of what had happened except for the way he held himself slightly careful on his left side. He sat across from his father and ordered the pasta, and talked about school in short, complete sentences, the way kids do when they're used to adults who don't have a lot of time. He was 12 and precise and a little formal, and Vera liked him immediately. You're the lady who called my dad, he said when Dorian had stepped away to take a phone call. I am. He doesn't usually let people call that number, he told me. I called anyway. Kieran looked at her with those brown eyes that were nothing like his father's and said, good. Then he went back to his pasta. She asked Dorian about Kieran's mother once by accident, in the middle of a conversation about renovation permits that had somehow gone on for 40 minutes in the back corner of the restaurant after close. She'd said something about the building's history, and he'd said something about the previous owners, and she'd said, what was the wife's name, meaning the previous owner's wife, and Dorian had gone very still. I don't have a wife, he said. I meant, the previous owner, I was asking about, I know what you meant. He picked up his coffee. Kieran's mother left when he was 3. She found the life I lead disagreeable. What life is that? He looked at her over the rim of the cup. You know what I do, Vera. I know what Gabby told me. And what did Gabby tell you? That you own half the block. A pause. And some other things. The other things, he said, setting the cup down carefully, are accurate. She'd known by then. It wasn't hard to piece together. The 2 men who appeared and disappeared without speaking. The way people on the street tracked him when he walked past. The fact that the city inspector who'd been threatening her with a surprise audit for 6 months had suddenly and inexplicably stopped calling. She hadn't asked Dorian about that last one. She wasn't sure she wanted the answer. What she did say that night was, I'm not afraid of you. He looked at her for a long moment. I know. Is that a problem? No, he said. It's unusual. The problem arrived on a Tuesday in the form of a man named Sutton who came in during the lunch rush and sat at the bar and ordered a coffee he didn't drink. Vera noticed him because he was the only person in the place who wasn't eating and because he kept looking at the door. When she went over to ask if he wanted anything else, he leaned in close enough that she could smell the cigarettes and said, Tell Vance his arrangement with the Kellner brothers is over, and tell him we know about the girl. Vera kept her expression exactly the same. She'd learned that from 20 years of service work. Keep the face calm, keep the voice even, let your hands do the work. She refilled his coffee without asking if he wanted it. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. Can I get you a slice of pie? Sutton looked at her like he was trying to decide something. Then he left without touching the coffee. She didn't tell Dorian that night. She told him the next Thursday, matter-of-factly, in the same tone she used to tell him the cold storage temperature had dropped back to normal after the vent repair. She described the man, repeated the message word for word. Dorian didn't move for about 4 seconds. When he spoke, his voice was perfectly level. "You're sure those were the exact words?" "I have a good memory for orders," she said. "It extends to threats, apparently." "It wasn't a threat to you. I know, it was a message through me, which is different and also not great." She folded her arms. "Who are the Kellner brothers?" "People I used to do business with." "And the girl?" Dorian looked at her steadily. "That would be Kieran's tutor. She's been helping me locate some financial records that certain people would prefer stayed lost." He paused. "I should have moved her 2 weeks ago. Is she in danger?" "She will be if Sutton's already talking." Vera thought about this for exactly as long as she needed to. "There's a studio apartment above this restaurant. My father used to live there. It's empty right now. If your tutor needs somewhere to stay for a few days that nobody would think to look." "Vera." He said her name the way he said everything, level and exact. But there was something underneath it this time. Something that took her a moment to identify, because she didn't often see it on people who moved through the world like Dorian Vance. It was something close to gratitude. "You understand what you'd be stepping into. I understand that a person might need a safe place, and I happen to have one." She met his eyes. "I'm not asking for a detailed briefing on your business arrangements. I'm asking if she needs the room." She stayed in the apartment for 9 days. Vera brought her meals from the restaurant and didn't ask questions, and the woman, whose name was apparently Ren, just Ren, turned out to speak 4 languages and be exceptionally good at the Tuesday crossword, and they ate together twice in the narrow kitchen upstairs and didn't talk about anything important. And it was, strangely, one of the more comfortable arrangements Vera had made with another human being in recent memory. The other thing that arrived in November, in a white envelope that was not heavy cream paper and did not contain cash, was a letter from the Diagnostic Imaging Center across town. Her mother had been having headaches. Vera had driven her to 3 different appointments over the summer, telling herself it was migraines, telling herself it was stress, telling herself what people tell themselves when they can't afford for it to be anything else. The letter was precise and clinical, and it used words that Vera had to look up twice to make sure she was reading them correctly. She sat at the kitchen counter in her apartment above the restaurant, different apartment, smaller, directly above the dining room, and read the letter at 11:45 at night and did not cry, because crying required a kind of surrender she didn't have time for right now. She calculated instead treatment costs, what the restaurant could absorb, what she'd need to borrow, whether the equipment lease could be restructured, whether there was anyone she could call. There wasn't, really. Her father's hands shook. Her sister was in Phoenix with 3 kids and a mortgage. Her mother was the person she called when things went wrong, which was a category her mother now firmly occupied. She folded the letter and put it in the drawer under the phone charger and went to bed. She didn't tell Dorian. She wasn't going to tell Dorian. Whatever this thing was, Thursday dinners, long conversations about building codes and neighborhood history, the easy way they'd settled into proximity without either of them naming it. She wasn't going to turn it into something that required him to feel obligated. She had seen what obligation looked like on powerful men. She didn't want it pointed at her mother. What she didn't account for was Gabby. Gabby, who had apparently overheard Vera on the phone with the insurance company during a slow Wednesday afternoon. Gabby, who had mentioned it to Dorian the following Thursday in the 30 seconds she'd spent taking his order before Vera appeared. Gabby, who looked deeply unapologetic when Vera found out. "Someone had to tell him," Gabby said. "No one had to tell him anything," Vera said. "He asked how you were doing." "Then the answer is fine. The answer is always fine." Gabby had the decency to look slightly sorry. He didn't look like he was going to do anything weird about it. Dorian didn't do anything weird about it. What he did was wait until the restaurant emptied out and then sit across from her and say quietly, "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because it's not your problem." "That's not the reason. It's the only reason I'm offering." He was quiet for a moment. Outside, the street was doing what streets do at midnight in November. Rain, headlights, the distant sound of a delivery truck. Vera had one hand wrapped around a coffee cup she'd stopped drinking 10 minutes ago. "My company has a relationship with the oncology program at Whitmore Medical," Dorian said. "Research funding. It's legitimate. It's been in place for 6 years. It has nothing to do with anything else I do. The department head there owes me a conversation." Vera looked at him. "A conversation," he said again, "in which I would explain your mother's situation and ask whether they have capacity for an additional patient at a reduced rate given the existing relationship." She nodded. "Yes, I understand. I'll talk to my mother about it." Which they do. They have a formal program for it. I'm not inventing anything. You don't have to do this. I know I can't pay you back. I'm not asking you, to Dorian. She said his name flat, no expression. I know what accepting things from people like you costs. He didn't flinch. What do you think I'd ask for? I don't know. That's the problem. He looked at her across the table, and for once he didn't seem like a man who had pre-calculated every word. He seemed like someone who was choosing carefully in real time. Nothing, he said. I would ask for nothing because your son... He stopped, corrected himself. Because Kieran hasn't been that easy to talk to since he was 8 years old. And for the last 6 weeks, he's been coming home from dinner here, talking about whatever you said to him. About the restaurant. About your father. About whatever it is you tell him about the neighborhood. He picked up his coffee, set it down without drinking. People who make my son feel like a normal kid are not something I have an excess of. Vera was quiet for a long time. It's a referral, she said finally. Not a favor, correct, and I'd want to know exactly what the program covers before she goes in for anything. I'll have the documents to you by Friday, she nodded slowly. Outside, a truck horn and then silence. Thank you, she said. It came out smaller than she intended. Don't thank me, he said. You told me that once. I said it for basic human decency. A pause. This qualifies as something more than that. He almost smiled. She'd gotten better at recognizing the signs. The slight change around his eyes, the way his shoulders dropped half an inch. She'd cataloged it without meaning to. The Kellner situation resolved itself in a way that Vera was glad she didn't have to know the details of. What she knew was that Sutton didn't come back. What she knew was that Wren left the upstairs apartment on a Thursday morning with a duffel bag and a crossword book, and pressed Vera's hand at the door and said, "Thank you for not asking," in a way that sounded like she didn't say thank you easily. What she knew was that the city inspector who'd been threatening the audit sent a formal notice that Lund's had been cleared for the next calendar year. She didn't ask about that one. She'd made that decision ahead of time. What she did ask about, on a cold December evening when the restaurant was closed for a private party, and she and Dorian were the last 2 people left, was the thing she'd been circling for 3 months. What happens to Kieran, she said, when all of this catches up with you? She hadn't planned to ask it. It came out direct, the way things did when she was tired and the room was warm and she'd stopped performing the careful version of herself. Dorian looked at her across the cleared table. He didn't ask what she meant by all of this. He knew what she meant. He goes to his aunt, he said, in Seattle. She knows what to do. There's money set aside, and the legitimate parts of the business, and a letter that explains everything in language a 12-year-old can understand when he's old enough. You've planned it, a long time ago. Does that make it easier? He considered this, took his time with it the way he took his time with things that mattered. No, he said, it makes it done. Vera nodded. She thought about her own version of that math. The contingency arrangements she'd made for her mother, for the restaurant, the way people who grew up watching someone they loved get sick early learned to plan for disasters before they were invited. It was a certain kind of love, she thought. Unglamorous and practical, and so thorough it looked like coldness from the outside. He'll be okay, she said. Not a comfort, a statement. She'd spent enough time with Kieran by now to mean it. Because you told him he would be? There was something in his voice that was almost light. Because he's like you. She held his gaze. He does the work ahead of time. Dorian was quiet for a moment. Then he reached across the table and put his hand over hers, carefully the way he did everything. Like he'd decided to do it and wasn't going to do it halfway. She didn't pull back. My mother's first appointment is next week, she said after a moment. I know, Dr. Ashford's team is good. She asked me who set it up. Vera looked down at the table, then back up. I told her a friend. Dorian didn't say anything, but the muscles around his eyes shifted, the ones she'd learned to watch, and she thought, not for the first time, that she was very glad she'd called that number. It was Kieran who asked about a month later, with the directness that 12-year-olds deploy when they've been wondering something for a while and have finally decided the wondering is worse than the asking. Are you and my dad friends? Vera was plating dessert for table 6. She finished before she answered. We have dinner here every Thursday. That's not what I asked. She looked at the boy sitting at the end of the pass, doing homework with his binder spread across 3 square feet of her prep counter, entirely comfortable in a space that most adults treated like it belonged to someone else. He'd started coming in on weeknights sometimes when Dorian had late meetings. She'd started keeping the good hot chocolate stocked. I don't know what we are, she said honestly. Kieran thought about this. He talks about you, he said. He doesn't usually talk about people. What does he say? That you're stubborn. Vera laughed before she could stop it, genuine, short. He's not wrong. He says it like it's a good thing. Kieran turned a page in his binder. My dad doesn't usually like easy things. She thought about that all night. She thought about it the next Thursday when Dorian came in at 7:15 and sat at table 4 and looked up when she walked over. And something in his face did the thing it had started doing recently. A kind of opening, small and deliberate, the way a door opens when someone on the other side has finally decided to turn the knob. She brought him coffee without asking. She sat down across from him without being invited. He didn't say anything about it. Outside, the block that was half his and half hers hummed with the ordinary business of the evening. Inside, the restaurant smelled like her father's recipe for braised short rib, and the good vanilla her mother had always insisted on, and the particular combination of grease and wood smoke and citrus that meant the kitchen was running right. Dorian Vance picked up his coffee. He didn't read the menu because he hadn't needed to in 6 weeks. Vera Lund looked at him across the table and thought, I called that number because a boy needed help. And everything after that was a choice, every single one.